Welcome back to Face the Nation. I'm John Dickerson. We're back now with CBS News security analyst Michael Morell, former National Security Advisor to President Obama, Tom Donilon, and former Homeland Security Advisor to President George W. Bush, Frances Townsend. Tom, I want to start with you. Give me your assessment of where things are now with the fight against ISIS.
Well, okay, and we'll take into account the points that Michael made. I think that the terror threat has evolved and metastasized. You know, we undertook a very aggressive effort through 2 administrations against al-Qaeda. Had a lot of success with respect to that, but this is now, as I said, evolved and metastasized. I think we're in a new and more dangerous phase with respect to the terror threat against the West and the United States. I think that's manifested itself in ISIS moving from a focused agenda around building a so-called caliphate in the area of Iraq and Syria to an external agenda. And I think that that's what we've seen. You know, since they basically announced they were going to do this since last August, they've been, by my count, have launched attacks in 10 countries. And just in the last few weeks, we've seen attacks at Sharm el-Sheikh, in Beirut, and then in Paris, which have resulted in the loss of life of 400 people just in the last few weeks. So we are in a new and more dangerous phase, John.
Fran, what do you make of this new phase?
Well, and I think what it underscores, to Tom's point, is that you can't have a multi-pronged approach to fighting ISIS any longer. This notion of the president's agenda of having Iraq first before Syria, I think what you're seeing is the global threat is emanating out of Syria. You must have a Syria first policy now. You must, in order to disrupt the global threat. And I think that really is now underscored by the emanation of this threat, as Tom points out, in places around the world and the loss of life.
I just want to add that for me, who lived through the pre-9/11 years, there's a similarity here that's a bit frightening to me. You have a group who says it wants to attack us, just as bin Laden said he wanted to attack us. You have them building that capability, just as bin Laden built it. We don't have great visibility into that capability, just as we did not do then. They have the single most important advantage, a safe haven, building that capability. And we just had a major attack overseas, embassy bombings in 1998, Paris now, that should be a wake-up call. The similarities are very concerning.
To that point, I mean, I really do think you've got to say to yourself, if we learned anything from 9/11, you got to do today what you would do post an attack, and do it now before the attack.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. But it's different and even more complicated, Michael, than that period. I agree with a lot of the points you made. We have seen a systemic breakdown in state authority in the Arab Middle East, which has allowed these large swaths of ungoverned territory to emerge, into which these groups have filled the vacuum. That's a different circumstance in terms of the amount of space that these groups have to operate from. And one of the lessons, of course, out of 9/11 is giving these groups operational space, like they had in Afghanistan, is a dangerous thing to do for us. And the numbers are a lot bigger with respect to potential pools of terrorists. And last, and Michael's made this point in other forums, the speed with which this organization, ISIS, has recruited and organized itself is substantially faster than al-Qaeda.
That was Senator Feinstein's point about speed, pace here.
Right.
Mike, though, if to Fran's point, do today what we will do tomorrow after an attack, what does that list look like?
This is the big challenge. I mean, it really is the big challenge. You know, the lesson learned of 9/11 was, can we as a nation act before we get attacked, right? And that is very difficult. You know, President Roosevelt could not bring the American people along to intervene in World War II until we were attacked at Pearl Harbor. So it is very difficult for a president to bring a nation along to say, let's act now to disrupt what we know is going to happen.
And Tom, this is a president who you served, who's in his 7th year, came in promising to pull troops out. I mean, does he have the energy for this fight if it calls for much more?
Well, he certainly has, certainly. And the circumstances have evolved and changed as we've been discussing. And there are a number of things that need to be done. And both the President and the Secretary of Defense have said that the effort needs to be intensified in Syria and in Iraq, to Fran's point, especially in Syria. It is critical for us to break the narrative of success of this organization. And to do that, you need some victories, including taking down their capital in Raqqa, Syria. And I do think we will head towards having more direct support for these efforts by American Special Operations Force.
But to do that, the president would have to acknowledge that the current strategy is failing, right? In order to revitalize and intensify it, you'd have to acknowledge, right, that what we're doing isn't producing the results fast enough, to Mike's point. It has to have a sense of urgency.
There's two things we have to accomplish here to squeeze these guys and degrade these guys. One is we have to put pressure on them in the safe haven and shrink the safe haven. Right? That's lesson learned number one of defeating Al-Qaeda in South Asia. Lesson number two is you got to remove the leadership in rapid succession. Right? Those are the two things you have to accomplish.